We're ready, Deputy Mayor.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this September 15th, 2020 meeting of the City Council. And if you'll please direct your attention to Councilwoman Hiller for the invocation. Please stand, please, as you're able.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This evening, I would like to introduce Jason Lichty from Care Paravel Latin School. Care Paravel sits in the center of Central Topeka. It's in the former Clay Elementary School that many people may know at 7th and Clay. Care Paravel is a classical Christian college preparatory school. Each and every student is challenged and inspired by their curriculum while being given the tools with which to further their learning. In addition to the academics, Care Paravel Latin School also includes a comprehensive student life program, a fine arts program, and athletics programming. Our invocation tonight, as I said, is being presented by Jason Lichty. He grew up in Topeka and attended McClure Elementary, French Middle School in Topeka West, before heading to Baylor University to play football and study classics that can go together, just in case you wondered. He has taught Latin to kindergarten through 12th graders for 21 years, including the last 5 at Care Paravel Latin here in Topeka. Jason.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I can't help but as a Latin teacher to talk about the word invocation, which comes from the Latin invoco, meaning to call upon. And so, in my opinion, you all have called on 3 different things. First of all, you called upon me. Thank you so much. Secondly, I know you all are called upon to work for the good of the city. And so I know that can be really hard. There can be a lot of toil. There's a lot of, sometimes it's pretty thankless. And so I was reminded of something that just happened in the world of archaeology. And this is in Bamberg, England. There was a dig going on, all right? So in archaeology, digs happen all summer long. And so it was about to wrap up. This was about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, this dig was about to wrap up, and they were almost done for the day. And in archaeology, you work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I mean, you're getting your hands dirty and literally digging in the dirt. And so what happened is, as they were about to wrap up, not just for the day, but for the season, somebody said, hey, what if we just dug just a little bit deeper? What if we just dug just a little deeper, a few inches deeper? And sure enough, they dug just a little bit deeper. And up to that point, they'd only found things that were up to about 600 AD or so. They found a Roman roundhouse. A Roman roundhouse. It was just reported in Smithsonian Magazine because they dug just a little bit deeper. They were ready to put all the dirt back. They'd already recorded everything. And I know sometimes as city councilors, I'm sure, it feels like you're doing all this work, you put all the dirt back, and all you have for your efforts is loose soil. But sometimes, every now and again, not always, but every now and again, you know, if you'll just dig just a little bit deeper, then sometimes the find can be really incredible. And so I think that, I saw that in Smithsonian, and I just thought, man, this is perfect. This is exactly what you all have been called upon for. And so I wanted to share that quick story with you. And then also, so you've called upon me, you all are called upon, and then we also call upon God. And so in that, let's pray. Heavenly Father, in you we live and move and have our being. We humbly pray that you guide and govern us by your Holy Spirit, that you grant discernment to the mayor and the city councilors, that you move and work in the hearts of those who live in Topeka to turn to you, that you give us strength and capacity to dig deeper when it's necessary, that you give us all peace and rest from worry, that you be here tonight, and that in all the cares and occupations of our life, we may not forget you, but may remember that we are ever walking in your sight. Through Jesus Christ, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And for those of you who are hoping to see the mayor here tonight, which is probably everybody, including me, she unfortunately, a friend became ill and had to be rushed to the hospital, and she's there helping her friend tonight. So I hope there's a speedy recovery, Mayor, for your friend. If the city clerk will read the next. Or do I just go on with the proclamation? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Mayor De La Isla, Council Members Hiller,
Here.
Valdivia Acala,
Here.
Ortiz,
Here.
Emerson,
Here?
Padilla,
Here.
Nager,
Here.
Dobler,
Here.
Duncan,
Here.
and Lesser.
Here.
We have 9 present.
Thank you. The next item is a proclamation, and I see Mr. Ogle is with us virtually on the screen there, and I understand, Mr. Ogle, you already have a copy of the proclamation, correct?
I had a little trouble hearing you, Councilman Emerson. Could you repeat that question?
You do have a copy now of the proclamation with you, is that correct?
I do not have a copy with me. I've not yet received it from the mayor's office.
Okay, well, you'll be getting that shortly, but I am going to read this right quick. Like I said, this is normally we would have the person obviously come in these COVID times. We're making the best, and it's always great to see one of my favorite constituents from District 4. So with that, a proclamation by the mayor, whereas in recognition of Topeka, Kansas, as a powerful destination for authentic Underground Railroad history, and in commemoration of all those involved in the Underground Railroad and the thousands of freedom seekers, and whereas the National Underground Railroad Network of Freedom acknowledges the significance of the Underground Railroad and all those involved for its contribution to the eradication of slavery in the United States, and as a cornerstone for a more comprehensive civil rights movement that followed. And whereas Kansas is home to 21 different National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom sites. And whereas Topeka, Kansas is represented on the National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom with Constitution Hall, the John and Mary Ritchie House, the John Armstrong House, and the Owens House. And whereas the National Park Service's Brown v. Board National Historic Site in Topeka, Kansas is an international center for learning more about these struggles for freedom. And whereas the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area as a National Park Service partner serves to bring together these many freedom sites as part of its mission to document and share the enduring struggle for freedom in Kansas. Now, therefore, Michelle De La Isla, Mayor of the City of Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim the month of September 2020 as International Underground Railroad Month. So, Mr. Ogle, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Councilman. I do appreciate that unfortunately the mayor's not able to be at the meeting tonight, but it is a treat to have my councilman presiding over the meeting. So it was good to see you and doing well. International Underground Railroad Network to Freedom Month is a function that is being celebrated in some 15 states now and 2 Canadian provinces. Many people who are aware of the Underground Railroad, they think of it as an eastern United States element, when in fact a very important part of that effort occurred in our neck of the woods. And that's what we've tried to accommodate and promote during this month. We have produced a number of digital programs, including coming up this Thursday is a digital program on Constitution Hall, which is one of the sites on the Underground Railroad Network to Freedom. And I hope you all will get an opportunity to either participate in those programs or see some of the other elements associated with the sites by visiting those sites and utilizing our Freedom's Frontier app to discover the sites and achieve National Park Service digital passport stamps. So thank you all very much for your service, and thank you for this recognition of the Underground Railroad in Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogle, for everything you do. All right, if the clerk could please read the next item.
Presentations, the recognition of City of Topeka retirees.
Well, thank you. This item was something that was suggested by a council member to me, Councilman Duncan, brought to me and then was supported by other council members, that as a council and a governing body, they have few opportunities to recognize and say thank you to our employees. And the idea came forward of doing a recognition retiree event at the city council meetings, at the governing body meetings. And so tonight, we're having our first one of those. I want to thank Luann Davis for her help in getting this arranged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the individuals that are here forward and introduce them and tell a little bit about their years of service with the city, their title and department that they worked at. And then we'll have an opportunity for comments after we're complete. We have, not everyone is here, and so eventually there will be some that we...
You didn't tell them they had comments.
So the first one up is Maria Villalobos, and family are joining them as well. You get the camera on. Maria has been with the city 7 years, and her last title was Office Assistant 2, and she worked in the Utilities Department. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Dennis Supple, did he end up making it? No. Dennis Supple was 16 years of service with the city. He worked in the wastewater treatment facility as an operator in the Utilities Department. We have William Terry Joyce, who is an accountant, is joining us by Zoom. 1
I
second.
do not know if he made it
Did he-
to the Zoom.
Show? Okay. And he was with the city for 17 years as an accountant in the Utilities Department. By Zoom, Jay Euler, I saw him earlier.
There he is.
Jay was with the city for 19 years as our purchasing director in our finance department. So thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Next is Dominic Yancey. He's with the city for 26 years as a police officer. And then Donna Peoples is here. Donna was with the city for 30 years, last finishing as a supervisor at the our fleet department in our public works. So thank you, Donna.
Thank you all.
Next is Christy Reed. Christy has been with the city for 31 years, and she finishes an Office Assistant 3 in our Utilities Department. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you very much. True honor.
Thank you.
And Kelly Adams. Kelly was with the city for 34 years and finished as our Deputy Fire Chief. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So those are those that were present. I'm going to read off some others that, and then Taylor will flip the slides. So Linda Voss was with the city for 11 years. She was an engineer in our Public Works Department. Becky Asapi was with the city for 12 years and finished as our zoning inspector in our planning department. Darrell Volkel was with the city for 14 years and another supervisor at Fleet, our Public Works Department. Michelle Radmaker, 20 years with the city, retired as a fire captain. Martin Brown, 21 years with the city as a police officer. Victor Nguano, I'm going to guess that's right. Nguano, maintenance worker in Public Works Department, 21 years. Robin Verser, 21 years, retired as a master mechanic in our Public Works Department. Richard McNeil, 22 years as a maintenance worker in our Public Works Department. James Simpson, 24 years as a fire captain. Timothy Noonan, 25 years as a police officer. Mary Shaw, 25 years, as an office specialist in our Topeka Police Department. Gerald Biggs, 26 years, retired as a police detective. Stephen Roth, retired 26 years, retired as a police lieutenant. Amy Bloom, 28 years with the city, retired as a management analyst. Lance Fay, 29 years, retired as a police sergeant. Exetta Steele, 29 years with the city as an accounting specialist in the fire department. David Fish, 29 years with the city, retired as a senior GIS analyst in our public works department. Janine Fowley, 30 years, retired as a police detective. Barbara Pyle, 30 years as an accounting specialist in our public works department. James Darren Scott, 31 years, retired as a police major. William Swalwell, 31 years as a parking maintenance worker with our public works department. Warren Harris, 32 years, retired as a senior maintenance mechanic in our utilities department. Lisa Pinkley, 34 years as supervisor, our animal control department in the police department. And Penny Ehal, office assistant 3, 36 years with the city in our utilities department. And Kent Pelton, 38 years, retired as a supervisor in our parking division in the public works department. So this is a little longer list than normal. We had our early retirement program, and some of these individuals took advantage of that. And so our list is a little longer than normal, but we plan to do this once a quarter and recognize these fine employees that we've had working for us. So, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, City Manager. We are lucky we have some great employees. I'd ask the City Clerk, please, to read the next item.
Next item is the consent agenda. Item A is the minutes of the regular meeting of September 8, 2020. And item B are applications. There was a list of cereal malt beverage applications that were distributed. Staff is recommending approval.
All right, you've heard the consent agenda read. Do I have a motion? Okay, a motion made by Councilwoman Nager and seconded by Councilwoman Ortiz. Any discussion? Seeing none. Okay, a roll call vote. Okay, thank you.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Emerson,
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yeses. And the motion passes.
Thank you. We're on to the action items now. If the clerk will please read.
Item 5A is approval of a 3-year labor contract effective January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023 between the City of Topeka and United Workers of Environmental Trades of Topeka representing employees of the Water Pollution Control Utility Division.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we went through the terms of this labor agreement. You had it in your packet and presented to you last week. The contract is a fair contract from both sides, and I recommend approval.
Okay, and I'm sorry. Sorry, 1 second here. Didn't know if we had anybody signed up to speak on this item.
No, it was not.
Okay, sorry. Okay, are there any questions from the governing body? Okay, at this point, I entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a motion for approval by Councilman Dobler, seconded by Councilwoman Nager. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to please call for the vote.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Emerson,
Yes.
Councilmembers Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Agenda item 5B is ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by section 18.50.050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at 605 Southwest Fairlawn from C4 Commercial District to M3 Multiple Family Dwelling District.
Thank you. Mr. Trout?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So tonight, Bill Finder, Director of Planning and Development, will present information on a zoning change request for your consideration. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, governing body. The first zoning case, or two tonight. The first one is at 6th and Fairlawn. No, the next one.
Oh, it's up here.
Thank you. Is at 6th and Fairlawn. This is a request to rezone the property from C4 commercial to M3 multiple family. As you know, many of this has been used as a hotel, the old Holodome and Ramada West since 1958 in some form or fashion. It was recently vacated in 2017. The new owners would like to adaptively reuse the property for workforce housing and convert the hotel rooms into, we estimate 140 so apartment units, studio, single, two-bedroom apartment units. There would also be amenities for them, storage units, exercise areas, co-work space, and play areas. So it would be a fully comprehensive development. The analysis concluded, again, the intensity is appropriate here at 6th and Fairlawn, supported by the comprehensive plan. You have another big complement to our recently passed housing study that shows a need for 4,000 units of workforce housing over the next 20 years. So this would make a nice little dent in that. There were some questions about traffic. For instance, this would not generate any more traffic than what is than a hotel or commercial uses for this site. It's actually a very good site for this use because you have such good transit, bike and ped connections for the residents. So with that in mind, Planning Commission did recommend unanimous approval. Staff did recommend approval as well. So I'll just stand for any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Mr. Fiander? One second before I can't see everyone yet. Yeah, Councilwoman Nager. Yeah, Councilwoman Nager, do you have a question for Mr. Fiander? You're muted.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Not so much a question, but just as a student who went to Landon Middle School, I think it'd be great to make sure that this area is put to use. And I think that it would be a good influence on the community around it and hopefully make it a safer place for those middle schoolers. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
I just want to thank the developers as well as the planning staff and the planning commission. One of the things that the housing study talked about and that at least some of us talk about a lot is exciting new models for housing and kind of doing creative reuse of structures that we have as well. And this is very cutting edge. It is happening in other communities. It's very exciting for us. It suits the kind of model that many millennials are looking for, as well as people who are single and of modest means. And so it will be exciting to see this develop. Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm excited about this as well. It happens to be in my district, so I have received several different calls about it. Two things real quick. The one thing I have made clear to people that this is not Section 8 housing. So I wanted to those questions have came up quite frequently in phone calls that I've received. This is moderate, affordable housing. Then the other thing I'd like to point out, Mrs. Connie Jacobson, who is a government teacher at Topeka West, has done a wonderful job with her classes, and I actually received numerous emails from her students as she used this as an example of how the council works, and so very well-educated students sent me some very good questions today that I was happy to answer, and I thank them for engaging in the process. So great questions today. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, there's a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second by Councilwoman Hiller. I just wanted to make sure, are there any other questions or comments anyone else wanted to make on the council? Okay, seeing none, this is the first of two agenda items that we will be voting on to change zoning. Therefore, we have an obligation to disclose any ex parte communications we've had. And basically, you'll need to certify that if you have engaged in any ex parte communication with any individual either in favor of or against the matter being considered, you must state this communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in this communication, you're able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. So if you'd raise your hand, please, for me, if you have had any ex parte communications. Okay, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I received some phone calls and some emails, and I can make a clear vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilman Lesser.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I've had conversations with the developer, the architect, Barry Feeker, and numerous constituents, and as I just explained, students from Topeka West High School in regards to this project, and I can make a impartial decision. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Lesser. All right. Seeing no other hands, I think it's time to vote on this, so if the clerk could please call the roll.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Emerson,
Yes.
Council members Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yeses.
All right.
The motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. Great project for that site, in my opinion. All right, if clerk could please read the next item.
Item 5C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout amending the district map referred to and made a part of zoning ordinances by Section 18.50.050 of the Topeka Municipal Code, approving a major amendment to the planned unit development master plan for Wanamaker West on a 2.1 acre property located approximately 500 feet west of the intersection of Southwest Wanamaker Road and Southwest 30th Terrace along the south side of Southwest 30th Terrace in order to add the use of indoor recreation type 2 to the allowed C2 and I1 uses indicated in the PUD master plan, all being within the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Thank you. Mr. Trout.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Bill Finder, Planning and Development Director, will also do a presentation tonight on this change request to the PUD for the property located on Southwest 30th Terrace. Bill?
Again, thank you. Yes, this is your second zoning item. It's pretty straightforward. It's a minor change to the existing PUD. You probably would be familiar with the site. It's just south of the Hy-Vee grocery store off of Wanamaker. It is a vacant piece of land, as you heard. The current zoning allows for commercial uses. C2's neighborhood-type commercials, restaurants, retail. Also allows some light industrial for outside storage of contractors' offices. So what they're amending here is adding another use that was not allowed as a part of that PUD, which is entertainment, indoor recreational, which is a golf, the actual use would be for golf simulated entertainment facility. So again, this will help market this property in a way that the zoning doesn't allow right now. We do feel like there's no adverse impacts here that aren't already in place with the current zoning. And quite honestly, we did not have any comments at the Planning Commission hearing. So with that in mind, staff had recommended approval. Planning Commission also recommended unanimous approval. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Finder. Any questions for Mr. Finder? Okay. No questions? Is there a motion? I believe this is in Mr. Well, yeah, I was going to ask you for that. I'd ask for a motion. Mr. Dobler, I think this is in your district, I believe. District 8, I'm sorry. All right, Mr. Duncan, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, sure, I will move it. No problem.
Okay, Mr. Duncan moves approval. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dobler. And at this point, I would ask again, a show of hands, anyone who had ex parte communications on this item? It looks like Mr. Duncan.
Mine were just constituents with multiple questions on the issue, and I may have had an email from the developer once, that I recall, but that was it. But I have no problem making a decision on this one. No conflicts.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Ms. Hill? Oh. Okay, seeing no other, I think it's time to vote. If the city clerk would please call the roll.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Emerson,
Yes.
Council members Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes. The motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much. It looks that is all the action items for tonight. We now go to the non-action items. If the clerk would please read the first one.
Item 6A is update on the City of Topeka 2020 operating budget.
Mr. Trout?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Finance has been providing the governing body updates on the revenues each month as we've gone through this response to the downturn in revenue from COVID. Tonight, however, we will provide you an update and forecast both on the revenues and expenses as it relates to the 2020 budget year. Jessica Lamondola, Administrative and Finance Services Director, is here and on Zoom, and she'll present. Jessica?
Good evening, governing body. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the operating budget. And I think it's safe to acknowledge that our current forecast is far more positive when compared to the discussion we had back in May. So I think, that's just as we're getting more information related to the response to COVID, what we're looking at in unemployment, recession potential numbers, and then also what we're looking at in the last quarter of the year. So you all should have received a memo on Friday detailing some of those items. And for those that don't have it in front of you, overall, the current forecast, and this is a little different than what we've seen before. Previously, we provided scenarios, and as we move through the year, we thought it was more helpful to you to start providing an actual forecast. But we can talk about the range and different items if you're interested, or if you find it helpful. So if you don't have it in front of you, overall, our total revenues, we expect to be, or our forecast to be under budget by approximately $2.8 million. And then budgeted expenditures under budget by approximately $1.8 million. And then if all the actions we've taken to date, along with several additional actions through the end of the year, we would expect to end the year, assuming everything played out as expected, approximately $356,000 with a deficit. So with the revenue numbers, and I think we'll start there, there's a couple key areas that I think we probably should highlight. The four areas of particular interest in terms of the year-end outcome are going to be, or at this point we think they will be, right? We're still learning a lot of things, but we think sales tax is of interest, franchise fees, building permits, and the zoo revenue. But across the board, in the forecast, except for sales tax, we are seeing stress in each of those items. So to talk first about sales tax, I mean, quite frankly, it's outperforming our expectations from the beginning of the year, not just ours, but I think many communities are seeing this as well, but you also have communities seeing significant decline. So in terms of sales tax, some of the things we're considering is that the city likely benefited from the stimulus that was put out before the summer, and then unemployment, the enhanced benefits probably help support the economy in the first half of the year. So as we move into the third and fourth quarters, those could still clearly be stresses, but we have consulted with GTP along with other cities and looking at the overall economic outlook. And we, at this point, believe that sales tax will perform in quarter three and quarter four, similar to how it's performed in the second quarter. So that means that people have really shifted some of their spending to online sales and really figured that out, along with the state collecting the compensating use tax. So that's definitely helped get to that outcome. And then we expect sales tax to kind of hover between 1% and 3% year-over-year growth. I would like to say that we're giving you probably the low impact scenario in sales tax on this, and even in discussions with Freddie at GTP, we do think there might, obviously be some concern. We are coming into a volatile election period. We're also coming into what some say could be another stressful period within the health the pandemic. Not that it hasn't already been stressful, but just combining it with the flu season, kids back in school and all of that, we could be seeing additional stress. So I think there's some potential that that sales tax number could come in approximately $1.5 million if you're just looking at the overall model. But we did not include that in the forecast you're seeing, but I just wanted to highlight it that we are still considering other scenarios, but we thought it was most helpful to say, here's where we think the year's going to end. Looking to the next large item, which is franchise fees, and this line item is tends to be difficult to project because it largely reflects the utility company's revenue and then the percentage we receive from that. And so obviously that varies year over year. This is one we're continuing to see stress, basically across the board from all of our franchise payers. One example on electricity, if you have a large commercial industrial property go offline like we did in the spring for a month or two, that impacts electricity use. So again, we're seeing some pressure with franchise fees. The next item, just to point out, and I think this is also important to consider as we're looking at sales tax, with building permits. So you'll see in the notes that the commercial properties were performing down in August, one of the worst Augusts that we've had in several years. And then looking at the balance of the year, we don't have those larger commercial properties in line. So in terms of permitting. So that sometimes can be a leading indicator when you're looking at the economics. We haven't integrated that into our thought process on sales tax at this point, but it is one of those items we will continue to monitor and work with planning to get up-to-date information for you. And then finally, another area that has while the forecast we provided in May did take zoo revenues down, we are seeing continued stress in that revenue item. So at present, we are expecting between $300,000 to $400,000 of lost revenue at the zoo. So this forecast does reflect that. So overall, like I said, revenues are performing better than originally anticipated. I would like to stress, we don't know what the last part of the year is, and although our expenses will be locked in on 12/31, we won't know the last 2 months of the year's sales tax until after we've closed our books in terms of expense. So just want to point that out. It's one of those items that we have to address and just stay cognizant of what forecasts we're seeing. So that's overall revenue for the general fund. Looking into expense, and so this was one of the first times we've given you an updated overall review of expense items. And I just want to point out that you'll see the largest variance is coming from our personnel services line. And that reflects health holiday that was provided the 2 pay periods for the city during the summer. That reflects vacant positions, trying to get to that vacancy credit, but then also holding vacant positions open. And it also reflects the work share program that some of our team participated in. And so it's clear, right, that the city employees from every department have stepped up and provided what they can to help the city manage through this stressful time. And so I just want to acknowledge that, vacancies, health holiday helps to offset some of that, but those vacancies and overall, cutting back on spending is stressful on employees. And I just, I'm very impressed with how each department has come to the table and said, this is what we can offer, and we're still going to provide services. So outside of that, contractual services is trending a little bit up from budget. That largely reflects some big items. I believe the insurance increase is reflected in that line. Commodities is performing fairly close to budget. So overall, we're expecting a budget variance of about $1.8 million. And that includes not expending the full snow budget. We had a really slow snow year in the beginning of the year, so that's why we brought that down. It does reflect the increased insurance costs that we've discussed several times. It reflects the assumption of being able to move some of our COVID-19 response-related expenses to the CARES Act funding. It reflects some additional capital expenditure that needs to occur this year, along with some technology improvements, and then some overage in a variety of departments. So overall, if everything performed exactly as we forecast, we would be using fund balance of about $356,000. That's well within our policy. However, it just as likely as going the other direction at this point, we could end up using more, just depending on how we see sales tax come in. So that's the brief summary. I'm happy to provide additional feedback. I'm happy to answer specific questions.
I see Councilman Duncan does have a question for you, Ms. Lamandolo.
Yeah, I assume it's you. If not, you can punt to the city manager. I'm not sure. Couple questions. In this memo, and you alluded to it, that the city can save $709,000 if another set of health holidays is implemented. Just clarification, are we talking outside of what we've already done? We're not included, okay. So then have we started conversations with all the appropriate parties that we need to see if we can make that happen?
Per the existing contract, that's a normal procedure, and so we don't have to have the extra negotiations and meet and confer that were required for the other one that we did. It's already written into our agreement to be able to pursue that. If financially able to do it, we can do it.
Okay. And then my second question was in regards to the fund balance. You talked about, so this estimate assumes using, you said 300,000, give or take, currently, like as of right now, this estimate, but the memo also mentions that we could use up to $2 million and stay within our 15% if we absolutely had to. Is that, if this doesn't make sense, you can tell me. Is that $2 million on top of the $300,000 we're planning to spend, or would that be 1.7 million, give or take, at this point?
It includes it, and the reason I don't have a specific number is that our policy is as a % of revenue. So if you use as a % of your budgeted revenue, and your revenues come in lower, that changes the percentage. But the $2 million estimate included in the memo includes the $356,000.
Okay, but this does not include that full 2 million assumption, just that 300,000.
Correct. No,
okay.
This is just the 356,000.
Okay.
So assuming it played exactly how we expected, we wouldn't use 1.7 million of that 2 million.
Okay, and then my last question, probably more towards the city manager, maybe not, is assuming some of these revenues replenish themselves. I know there's some expenses that were just done for the year regardless. I know there's others we're hoping we can put. What is the prioritization process in terms of where we distribute those dollars as they come in?
Jessica and I have had discussions, and we have put some of these items in what we're mainly focusing on. First, we've moved up how many individuals we're going to have in our police academy in October. When we originally came to you, we were looking at first we weren't sure we were going to have any academy, then we went to 10. Now we're right now predicting that we're going to have 16 recruits in the next class in October, which is needed based on a couple of retirements that we weren't expecting. And so that will help to get us about half of what we're currently delinquent, or short. The other thing is we will have a class in November for our fire department, so there will be 10 individuals, which is what they can handle per class. So there'll be 10 individuals for the fire department, which will happen in mid-November. That will start. And so we're going to replenish some of the vacancies that we've had, starting the process that we have in our 21 budget to bring them both up to fully staffed. In addition, we had some purchases that are capital-type purchases, like we already identified we needed to purchase new budgeting software. And so that will be one of the purchases. So we've looked at focusing mainly on some of the one-time purchases that we need to do, so that if something changes towards the end of the year, we could decide not to do that. And so that's kind of where we're at. But we focused first on getting good-sized classes for our emergency services, and then looking at the one-time purchases.
Thank you.
Yeah, before we go any further, we do have one person signed up to speak on this, Mr. Joseph Ledbetter. If you want to go ahead and make your comments now, please. Sure. Because what you say may spur some other questions, so I don't want to get all our questions out first. That'll be fine.
Thank you, everybody. I'm always interested in the operational budgets of the city. One of the things that you have to look at continuously is your level of FTEs. And I know you had some retirements. Of course, I'm exempting emergency services from my discussion, but overall, the city has shrunk 4% in the last 7 years, and we should have been seeing that kind of shrinkage in the FTEs at the same time. And we need to make sure that we're continuing to trim those positions, exempting the emergency staff, because it's just good budgeting. It's something that all good cities do, all good governments do. They do trim from time to time. There's a pruning needed, and so I commend you for doing that, but I also want to make sure that we're not hiring back a lot of non-emergency people over the next year or two, but we continue to trim those down. For a city our size, I still think we're about 150 over in FTEs, what we should be, in looking at other cities in Kansas. Another thing that I didn't see discussed, maybe I missed it, I was trying to watch carefully. I am curious and concerned about how many utility accounts we're losing as the city loses population. And I'd like to see some information on that. I'm not asking for it tonight, but I think that should be part of your reports. That's part of, I think that's $87 million of budget is just from utilities. So if people continue that trend of moving out, you may increase the rates, but you're not increasing the accounts. And it's important that you have more accounts, not less, year to year. Those are just some of the things I wanted to discuss. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. All right, Councilwoman Hill, have a question?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A comment and then a question. My comment is that thank you so much for this report. It is very encouraging. It's exactly the amount of detail and information. In addition, good news, of course, but thank you so much. Mr. Ledbetter touched on this, though. I'm more aware as time goes on that our general fund budget is less than a third of our entire city budget. And I know we're in the middle of a quarter, but will we, after the third quarter is over, be able to get this similar forecast for our entire city budget?
I think, obviously we can prepare that, but the focus has been, right now, based on concerns over revenues, has been the general fund. We'll continue to update the general fund, but I think you're right in that we could look at the utility and provide that to you at least. I think that makes sense so we know where we're at with the utilities department and how revenues are trending there, et cetera.
Thank you, because I appreciate, for instance, that if we do a health holiday, then our balance is going down in the health fund, and so, or not going up the way we thought it would, and so they do balance one another out. Again, I really appreciate this report. I just wanted to inquire about being able to see the rest of the budget at some point. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the other members of the governing body? All right. I'd just like to say, kind of echo Councilwoman Hiller's remarks. This has been a tough 6 months for our finance staff, Ms. Lamondola and her people, and Mr. Trout and his people, and all the city departments. I do appreciate the sacrifice people have made, and I can only imagine we were going through this about the same time that Jessica and her crew were trying to get the budget done, and we were besieging them with all sorts of questions and things about both COVID and the budget. So, and at that point, you also had a departure in your staff. So I really appreciate everything you went through, and great work. We're not out of it yet. We can't let up, but really appreciate all the work everyone did.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, that is that. I don't know if the city clerk could please read the next item.
Item 6B is discussion regarding proposed City of Topeka Stormwater Management Code provisions.
All right, and Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, our Utilities Department is going to provide a presentation on proposed changes to the Stormwater Management Code. Braxton Copley will kick off this discussion. Braxton?
Copley will be with us momentarily, I'm sure.
Looks like they're getting it.
Good evening, governing body members. Braxton Copley, Deputy Director of Utilities. I'm going to kick it off. I have Mary Howard, who is also on the meeting participating. I'm going to give a brief background in terms of where we've been and where we are, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who has a PowerPoint presentation to basically summarize the changes that or the proposed revisions to our stormwater program. Back in April of 2018, the EPA did an audit of our MS4, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Program. At the end of that month, they sent us a potential list of violations. The EPA then sat on that for over a year. It was late spring of 2019 when they finally served us with the notice of violation, at which point we entered into negotiations with them, and by the August of 2019, we had actually negotiated the agreed upon consent order. And basically there were four major items in that. One of those was they wanted to see improvements to our construction site program. Basically think of that as erosion and sediment runoff from construction activities. They had identified deficiencies in our post-construction BMP program, most notably on the ongoing maintenance of BMPs on private property. Additionally, we had some municipal good housekeeping. They wanted us to have better overall spill plans and stormwater pollution prevention plans for several municipal facilities. And then finally, they wanted us to reduce the discharge of certain pollutants that they have established total maximum daily limits for, and those notably are bacteria, nutrients, and sediment. And so before, or I should say in the meantime, between that long year between the investigation and the actual issuance of notice of violation, we engaged Wood to come in and take a hard look at our MS4 program, and basically, based on their nationwide experience, to provide us with suggestions on how we could improve our MS4 program overall. And what you're seeing tonight is basically the fruit of what we have been working very hard at for the last 2 years. So I don't want you to think that this is a hurried, slapped together thing. This has been very measured and ordered in terms of what we have been doing. I will also point out that in 2019, the city of Topeka was successful in getting a substantial grant from the Kansas Department of Agriculture to allow for two-dimensional modeling of all of our basins in the city of Topeka. And that modeling effort that was paid for by KDA basically is the basis for a couple of our proposed improvements in our stormwater management plan. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mary Howley to provide an overview of the proposed revisions.
Okay, thank you, Braxton. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, and if someone can let me know when they can see my screen.
We've got it.
Awesome. Okay. Launch this slideshow. All right, you should be able to see a slide now that says Stormwater Program Revisions.
Yes.
Okay, so taking off from what Braxton said, there were a number of goals for the revisions that we're going to talk about here today. The first of which is obviously we want Topeka to continue to comply with its municipal stormwater permit, and we want to comply with the consent order that came out of EPA's audit. So we're talking about, in relationship to the permit and the audit, we're talking about stormwater quality. By quality, I mean pollutants. stormwater quality treatment at new developments and redevelopments generally greater than an acre. Okay, so that's really what the permit deals with and what the audit is interested in. And it's also interested in the municipal design plan review, construction, and maintenance processes that support that stormwater quality treatment. So a municipality that's a permittee needs to have a regulation that says when you develop something in the city of Topeka, you need to treat the stormwater that comes off that site. That's one piece of the pie. The other thing that EPA and KDHE is going to want to see is that Topeka has the design plan review, the construction inspection, and the maintenance processes over the long term that support those BMPs that are put in the ground. Okay, so all of that is connected, all of it comes through what the EPA and the permit is asking for. Another goal is to modernize Topeka's code, improve it by aligning stormwater quality and quantity rules, and I'll explain that in a minute. By modernizing, obviously, we've got an improved understanding of Topeka's streams through that grant and the modeling that was done through the grant. So we can bring the code into kind of a more modern area by basing a lot of the code on the science that comes out of those models. So we're trying to regulate in a smarter manner. And again, I'll explain that pretty soon. Throughout all of this, we don't want to do something that is edge of the envelope. There are a lot of methods in the Midwest, particularly in your area and around Kansas City, Missouri, that are locally relevant. They're very familiar to the developers and the site designers that work in Topeka, and they're very flexible. They are not a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather they level the playing field for everybody, but allow a lot of flexibility from site design to site design. So there's a number of important terms that you're going to hear me say, and I want you to get on board with what those terms mean. A best management practice, or a BMP, is a structural facility, so it's constructed by the developer and site designer, that is used to manage stormwater runoff from a property. So again, we're not talking about erosion and sediment control in these slides. We're talking about the water quality and the runoff quantity that comes off after the development is completely constructed. So this is stormwater runoff that is managed on the property by the owner, tenant, or others. Okay? The second term is a stormwater quality BMP. So this is a constructed BMP again, but it focuses on the protection of streams and properties from pollution. Stormwater carries a lot of pollution in it. It's kind of the laundry cycle for the earth. So as it washes over our streets and roads and into our streams, it carries the pollutants that we've laid down on the streets and roads, oils, sediment, E. coli, things like that. So a stormwater quality BMP attempts to treat or eliminate those pollutants from stormwater. In contrast, a stormwater quantity BMP is all about flooding. So an example of a stormwater quantity BMP may be a detention pond or a retention pond, which is controlling the runoff to the degree that it, in hopes of, or with the target of it not flooding, whereas a stormwater quality BMP is managing pollutants. Topeka already has both of these types of BMPs on Jackson Street. The bioretention cells that are on the street are great examples of a stormwater quality BMP. As well, there's a number of large dry detention BMPs and some wet retention BMPs in Topeka that control flooding from properties. So let's get into the code revisions. The first one we're going to talk about is really the one with the most revisions. So currently, Topeka Municipal Code Chapter 1335 establishes the core requirements for stormwater quality management on new developments and redevelopments. So it's currently Topeka's stormwater quality only ordinance, okay? This code was developed back in 2008, 2009 as a direct result of the requirements of the municipal stormwater permit that Topeka has, that KDHE promulgated. The permit requires Topeka to adopt regulations requiring the control of stormwater pollutants on new developments and redevelopments. It does not, the ordinance does not currently address stormwater quantity management, such as flood protection, retention ponds, detention ponds. Currently, the flood protection requirements for stormwater quantity are in the design criteria and drafting standards that Topeka has. So the 2018 audit and the resulting 2019 consent order of Topeka's stormwater quality program was clear that Topeka's requirements for stormwater quality need to improve, particularly in the areas of plan review processes, BMP construction oversight, and maintenance. So we made a number of revisions to clarify design plan requirements. The audit and the consent order necessitated that the upgrades to the design planning process be made as soon as possible. So Braxton and some colleagues of mine within Wood have been working very hard with Sylvia and others to go ahead and get a lot of those changes in place and included in the current design process, even though they're not in the ordinance. Many designers already working in Topeka are very familiar with these new requirements. They've already been put out there. There's a checklist that they use to go through these, so they're very familiar with what's going on. As well, the proposed revisions to Chapter 1335 codify the use of a level of service approach for stormwater quality management. So for pollution control, we're identifying that a particular approach be used. This approach is one that designers in the region have already been using. It comes out of Kansas City. And has made its way through Kansas and through Missouri and other places as kind of the preferred approach. So it's a flexible and fair approach. It promotes the use of green infrastructure BMPs. So these are water quality BMPs that reduce the amount of runoff. They're seen as preferred BMPs over ones that simply clean water and send it out and don't reduce the amount of runoff. So it's flexible. Again, you can still use the traditional BMPs, but there's a lot more credit given for the green infrastructure BMPs. Designers are familiar with this method. As well, the proposed revision to the code also sets up the city very well for future compliance with the permit, because KDHE has already indicated that the level of service method is going to factor greatly into the next municipal permit that Topeka and other Kansas communities get. Another revision to Chapter 1335 expands its scope from just stormwater quality to now stormwater quantity. So we're now proposing that flood protection rules be moved out of the design criteria and drafting standards and into Chapter 1335. This is common in local government regulations. It's difficult to design and manage stormwater quantity and quality separately. So as a designer, having those rules in the same place and having those rules work together very well from a design and construction perspective is advantageous. It can be more cost effective. As well, with emerging technology with green infrastructure, you can gain some credit through what you do in stormwater quality when you finally get to having to design for stormwater quantity. So the revisions were made to move the detention and retention rules from the design criteria document and place them in the expanded Chapter 1335. The timing for this was really good. The detention and retention rules were pretty outdated in Topeka. They weren't really tied to actual rainfall runoff hydrology in Topeka. We have been using kind of some standard old school methods to do our work. So with the grant that Braxton spoke about that came from the Kansas Department of Agriculture, we studied Topeka's watersheds and streams with the express objective of understanding the rainfall and runoff hydrology in Topeka and upgrading potentially the stormwater regulations. So as a result, the proposed revisions include updated detention and retention requirements that are based on the hydrologic sensitivity of the watersheds in Topeka. So what does that mean? If a watershed is sensitive to increased runoff volume, and if we let volume go unabated, you could have flooding in that watershed. So we now know which watersheds those are. And when a new development comes into that watershed or redevelopment happens in that watershed, we can focus their stormwater requirements on stormwater volume control. They don't have to do stormwater peak flow control, which would be used in different watersheds that are sensitive to peak flow. So it allows us to kind of pick and choose based on our engineering analysis the controls that are needed. In some watershed in Topeka, we've learned that no flood control is needed. It's better to get the water off the property and into the Kansas River as soon as we can to avoid flooding later on in the storm event. So this allows us to be smarter about our stormwater quantity regulation. It allows us to be more locally appropriate. It's based on engineering analysis rather than the current one-size-fits-all approach. So to close out the slide, Chapter 1335 establishes the core requirements for stormwater design plans, stormwater quality, and quantity control. These are the revisions that we've made. The technical detail for how to adhere to these requirements we've now proposed to be in a BMP design handbook. Once again, the proposed revisions to the Chapter 1335 update and clarify stormwater quality and quantity requirements, also the design plans. However, because of the audit and the permit requirements, we added an entirely new set of requirements that center on construction termination. These requirements are the direct result of the permit, the audit. They have to do with ensuring that stormwater BMPs are properly constructed and that we're setting the eventual BMP owner, who will have the responsibility to keep those BMPs maintained, setting him or her up for success with a functioning and clean BMP from the very start. So toward this end, the revisions set forth two new rules. First, a stormwater BMP record drawing is required from the developer to submit to the city when construction is finished. That record drawing shows the as-constructed condition of the BMP and the stormwater system on that property, and it certifies that the system and the BMPs are clean, undamaged, and fully functional. Second, the revisions include the possibility for a final inspection by the city of the site's stormwater system and its BMPs to ensure compliance. The final inspection is not a requirement for the city. I think the revisions say that the city may inspect rather than the city shall inspect. But it's in there and can be done if the city needs to verify that the system, the BMP function is clean and that it's functioning. So, eventually if you have a developer or a constructor that maybe has a history of having a lot of sediment and not cleaning out of the system before he leaves construction, we can go in and take a look and kind of educate him on what we're looking for and get him to go ahead and clean up that before that property changes hands to a new owner. The steps that I just talked about for construction termination, this is very common now in modern local government stormwater regulations. As a consultant, I see it a lot around the nation, especially as more permitted cities and counties are now on the hook for ensuring ensuring the long-term functionality of stormwater BMPs on both public and private properties. That is a requirement of Topeka's municipal stormwater permit, It is not an easy requirement. Just about every client that I've had struggles with that because it's new to just about everybody. As a jurisdiction that is going to require, or that already requires property owners to maintain the BMPs on their property, Topeka, we found that Topeka really is critically in need of these new construction termination rules so that it can ensure both to KDHE and EPA, as well as to new property owners, that they have a sound and compliant permit program and the BMPs and stormwater systems are ready to go. As I said previously, the code does not contain technical detail. That is in the Stormwater Design Handbook. The front page or the cover of that handbook is shown here. The ordinance is not highly technical. The policies, the criteria, the calculations, and the guidance that are necessary to support designers who need to comply with the ordinance are in this handbook. It's important to understand, I think I mentioned previously, that there are several outstanding, really, really good stormwater quality and quantity design manuals that came out of the Kansas City, Missouri area in the early 2000s. These were put together by the American Public Works Association and the Kansas City Area Metropolitan Area Regional Commission. They're readily used by municipalities and designers in Kansas these days. Topeka designers are very familiar with it. Topeka's staff are very familiar with them. So there wasn't any need to recreate any of that. Instead of doing that, what we needed in Topeka was a local policy handbook that could convey the planning process and the policies that Topeka needs people to know to support Chapter 1335. And then refer users over to those Kansas City manuals that they're already familiar with for the calculation methods and things like that. Adopting a policy handbook as opposed to a full-blown design manual is becoming more popular. I do a lot of that work. Even larger cities and counties are finding that they don't need a full-blown design manual. There's plenty of those out there. As engineers, we learn how to design things in school, and we know, what we need to go to do that. The reason we need a handbook in Topeka and in many of these other cities are to make sure that those methods we learn in school are applied in an appropriate manner in Topeka, given Topeka's culture, given its geography, its topography, its hydrology, and Topeka's plans for economic growth and development. All of those things influence how you want designers to design in Topeka, completely separate from engineering design methods. This table of contents is shown in the slide. Like the ordinance, it addresses stormwater quality and quantity. It has a level of service method and refers over to Kansas City to do that. Okay. So the next chapter we're going to cover is Chapter 1340. This is a new code we're proposing, where Chapter 1335 that we just discussed covers stormwater BMP design and construction. This proposed new Chapter 1340 addresses long-term maintenance of BMPs once construction is finished and the BMPs are functioning. So while this will be a new ordinance for Topeka, the basic requirement, which is stormwater BMPs must be maintained by the property owner, is not new. That requirement is currently in your Chapter 1335. But we broke the maintenance requirement now into a new ordinance because the audience for BMP maintenance is completely different than the audience for BMP construction. The audience for BMP maintenance is a BMP owner, not a designer, not a developer, not a contractor. It's my mother, it's my brother who's a business owner, it's the grocery store down the street, the people that manage the grocery store. So these are the audience for 1340, and it targets specifically what they need to know. It does not change the requirement that property owners are responsible for maintenance of the BMPs. Rather, what it does is expand and support that requirement by providing some, predicating some rather prescriptive requirements in terms of how you go about doing that. Topeka's municipal stormwater program absolutely requires that the city ensure long-term maintenance of BMPs. But as I said, this has been a real problem over the United States. BMP owners are not experts in stormwater management, so local governments are finding that they have to provide greater clarity both regulatorily and from an educational perspective by setting minimum standards for BMP inspection and maintenance, and then providing guidance on how, when, and where, and why to inspect and maintain. Chapter 1340 does exactly that. Some things of note on the slide is that the new ordinance prescribes some specific inspection frequencies. The first is a documented inspection once every 2 years. The owner doesn't have to do them themselves. This can be done by a tenant, a facilities manager, a landscape company. All the owner has to do is make sure that it gets done and that it's documented. Then once every 6 years, the BMP must be inspected by a licensed professional like a civil engineer or landscape architect. The city oversees all of this by checking the inspection reports that are provided to them by the owners. The 2-year inspections assure the city that the BMPs are being maintained. If they're looking at it, they're maintaining it. The 6-year inspection by the professional provides the assurance to both the owner and the city that the BMP is functioning as required, and it will find repair items that may not be seen by a non-professional inspection. We researched what other cities are doing in Kansas regarding BMP inspections and maintenance. Many of them are requiring an annual professional inspection, so bringing in a professional engineer every year to inspect the BMP. I work in this routinely. This is my bread and butter. An annual professional inspection really is not necessary. These BMPs don't change a whole lot from year to year, but over the long term, they definitely do. So having a 2-year inspection that's documented every 2 years, and then getting a professional who really can look into things once every 6 years is really reasonable and appropriate from an engineering perspective, and I think will be completely fine with KDHE and with EPA. They typically don't even see this level of compliance. So this is a very reasonable program. The maturity that you have here in this program is key to compliance with your permit. You can measure whether a BMP is inspected and maintained very easily. You can tell when it's not being maintained. You can intercept problems earlier and educate the city before the BMP becomes completely failed. And those kinds of stop measures and check measures are really what KDHE and EPA want to see. So the new ordinance will give you that. Moreover, it's really important from a future infrastructure cost standpoint. We've all seen big overgrown detention ponds. These detention ponds are probably delivering a lot of sediment downstream into city systems. As a consultant, I've seen a lot of city tear up roads to fix their stormwater pipes, put in new pipes. You know, they've got this shiny new pipe in under a road, but they haven't really fixed the problem that's actually upstream in 6 or 7 detention ponds that have not been maintained. So it's not going to, this revision is not going to correct the past problems that are already there, but it certainly will stop the bleeding for future problems. Like Chapter 1335, Chapter 1340 refers to a supporting policy and guidance manual. That manual, the cover is shown here. This manual is really written for property owners, written for folks that are going to maintain BMPs. It's not highly technical, it's for lay people. And it's become clear over the years that we need to do this. It's simple, it's non-technical, it's educational and visual. There's a lot of photographs. A BMP can, or a person can easily understand things like a water needs to evaporate through plants, so plants are important as BMP. They need to stay healthy. The differentiation between a weed that's not going to help the BMP versus a plant that will provide functionality. So these will both be accepted by EPA and KDHE. They're part of the consent order, and it provides clear rules and guidance. So on to the next revision. We're coming down to the end here. This is about the Stormwater Utility Code, Chapter 1325. This is the code that authorizes and establishes rules for the city's stormwater drainage fee. The revisions that we're proposing to this code are confined to the fee adjustments or the fee discounts that are offered by the city. The current code includes discounts that have proven to be confusing, kind of weird to calculate. We cleaned up that text to make the calculations less confusing. That revision is shown in the very middle of the middle row of the table where it says revised. So what it's showing is that there's a 5% discount offered for each design storm control that is covered by a stormwater quantity BNP. There are a number of controls that are required, and as you go up in control, they get another 5% for a maximum of 30%. We also are proposing to add 2 new discounts, the first of which is a 10% discount for meeting Topeka's stormwater quality control requirements. If you exceed those requirements, that's the level of service method. If you exceed those requirements, which really means you're reducing stormwater volume, you can get another 10% if you exceed the requirements by 5% or more. So it's a much easier way of calculating fee discounts, a maximum fee adjustment of 40%. The fee adjustments are not provided in perpetuity. Rather, the BMPs and detention ponds that provide the fee discount at the time of construction must be properly maintained to ensure the discount continues. So the BMP maintenance program that I already discussed helps facilitate that provision. This allows the fee discounts for property owners from their perspective. It's now a benefit for them to take care of their own BMPs because they can continue to get up to a 40% discount if that BMP is maintained in good working condition. So they're getting something back for maintaining their BMPs. Next code revision up for your consideration is the buffer area code. This is the code that establishes rules for stream buffer design and use, Chapter 1710. The current chapter establishes stream buffer boundaries based on arbitrary widths. This is very common, but it's long been thought of as a less than adequate way to do it. The widths are very arbitrary. There's little research on why widths are what they are. The research that's out there is in the timber and forestry industry, and they've just been set into urban and suburban environments. They're difficult for designers to use because they're not really based on anything that's on the ground. So the width adjustments are really kind of unwieldy. They're not really based in reality. So again, that grant that Braxton mentioned earlier, it was used to model the watersheds and streams. Based on that, we could predict the changes in the streams that would occur as land continued to develop within and around Topeka. So it develops a computer-generated, science-based stream buffer boundary, which is based on stream geomorphology, its power, its erosivity, and other predictive parameters. So now we can set a boundary and predict a boundary based on what we know the stream will do over time and where we know existing property improvements are and where they may be located. We also can protect streams where we know they need to be most protective. Especially around structures that are already existing. The boundary is provided to developers as a geo-reference file, so there's no difficulty. They're given the file electronically, they can plop it down in their plans, and they're not setting buffer widths, or in the way that they had to do in the past. As well, from a regulatory perspective, we propose to disconnect the stream buffer requirements from the requirements for a regulated floodplain. These are two different concepts. They're regulated for two completely different purposes. So separating those regulations will provide clarity between floodplain rules and buffer rules without sacrificing any of the city's ability to provide and regulate flood protection and stream bank protection. Okay, last slide. The last code revision up for your consideration is Chapter 1730, which is the Floodplain Management Code. 1730. This is the code that establishes the city's rules for land development in and around floodplains. And you're aware a lot of work has been done to update your floodplain maps and levee areas and things like that. So a lot of things we've learned through that are now coming out in this revision. The proposed code revisions adds rules for construction, levee ponding areas, including the requirement for compensatory cuts for any fill placed in these areas. What we're trying to do here, the goal here, is to preserve the flood and drainage storage volume in the levee ponding areas and not lose any of that volume when fill is placed in those areas. We want to preserve our storage volume during flood events. We also added a similar rule requiring compensatory cuts for developments greater than 5,000 square feet that occur in the floodway fringe. Again, the goal is the same, to preserve storage area for floods and not let that get filled up by development and fill. So that's all I have. I appreciate the time in front of you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to work with Topeka. I've really enjoyed it, enjoyed getting to know you. And I guess we're open for questions at this point.
Any questions? Councilman? Sorry, Councilman Lesser, go ahead.
Couple questions here. I've lost my screen here.
Councilman Lesser, if you want to hold on just 1 second. We do have one person that signed up, Mr. Ledbetter.
Yep, that'll be fine.
Okay, sorry. Because his testimony may generate some questions. Mr. Ledbetter, welcome.
Thank you. Governing body. Well, that was interesting. It was kind of like drinking from a fire hose, at full speed. If I've ever seen anything come before this council that's ripe for a committee, this one is. This absolutely needs to go into a committee where the council and the public can have input. I'm going to be following this with some core requests. I want to see the actual consent decree. I want to see a number of things that were signed off on, as well as developers that were invited for input for this consulting. One of the things that I found interesting, they listed off 4 areas of concern. One was construction activity, then post-construction activity, better plans for municipal facilities. I didn't hear that discussed in this code. I apologize, she went pretty fast. I didn't get the 4th one written down. I'm not a stenographer. But what I'm concerned with is I saw one of these stormwater devices put in one of our great parks last year, and it's an absolute disaster. I'm on the Parks and Rec, and I just don't want to see a whole lot of these devices all over Topeka making us look like the craters of the moon. I know that one of the comments here is this has no budgetary impact to the city. But I'm hearing about inspections, and of course, city people have to follow up to make sure that these other inspectors do their jobs. I think it's an onerous request to ask people to have an engineer come in every 6 years. It seems like 10 would be more reasonable, and probably not even an engineer. It seems like there'd be other professionals we could call on to do these inspections by the private sector. I see a lot of questions that I have no time with 4 minutes to cover after that very lengthy PowerPoint. But the thing about PowerPoints is they don't go deep. They never do. You've got to do the follow-up questions. You've got to see the foundational documents where these things came from, and that's why I'm going to want to look at the consent decree, and I'm going to come up with some, probably some interesting notations when I read those, because I always do. Everything I've ever recorded, I've found lots and lots of information that wasn't presented to the council, or it could be the county commission, depending on what the core request was that I asked for. I've done a lot of those as a lawyer, and I'm pretty sure I know exactly what I want to already ask after this. But what I would say to the council is you got a huge amount of information here. And we have no time to really adequately discuss this in one or two meetings. And so my concern is we're going to put a lot of onerous requests in the future on commercial developers. It was mentioned that there might be 6 detention dams or devices upstream that would put sediment into a stream. And I'm thinking of Butcher Creek and that whole creek system. There's no dams. Out of 1,000 households in that whole High Crest West and then Southern Hills, none of these devices exist, and yet we're being told, oh my gosh, we've got to check for these, we've got to make sure we got lots of them to keep our streams clean. One of the things that I find interesting is there's no mention of litter. I want to touch on that for 1 minute.
Sure, you need...
Just 1 minute. If the council would...
Mr. Ledbetter's asking, okay, I see a motion by Councilmember Ortiz. Do I have a second to give Mr. Ledbetter, okay, and a second by Mr. Lesser? So if the clerk would please read.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
She's nodding.
Deputy Mayor Emerson,
Yes, yes.
Councilmembers Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes.
1 minute?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, in my observations of High Crest, where I was their president for 5 years, and all the streams and all the streets and all the intakes of the gutters that would or should have been there, I've noticed a lot of litter in this city. And I've noticed a lot of litter in our streams. And it seems like that would be the first thing you'd want to look at, quality of rivers and streams. If you were actually the EPA supposedly writing this, why wouldn't you look at cleanliness from litter, not just sediment? And so what I've said over several years, I've probably said this in this meeting, is if you just enforce the codes, you'd have a whole lot less litter. And it's amazing, and I'm not talking about just households. I'm talking about you go into any kind of fast food, banks. You see a lot of litter at Topeka, and all of that, when we have rain, goes right into the gutters, into the stormwater system. So I would like to see that addressed in this very lengthy consulting that we're doing. And I look forward to those cores I'll be filing about cost and things like that of this study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. I would ask, I don't know if Mr. Copley is still on here or not.
Yes, I am. Stand ready to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ledbetter brought up the issue of the timing of this. Is there, what is the time that you need a decision on this? What is the timeline? Can you tell me that, please?
Under the initial agreed upon order of consent, our deadline for getting the post-construction BMP ordinance adopted by the governing body was in May of 2020. During the COVID pandemic, we asked for an extension of time, and were granted an extension until September of 2020. Obviously, we've just now put this ordinance in front of you, and it's contemplated to be back in front of you in October. For action, we have asked the EPA for an extension until October for adoption of the ordinance. So time is of the essence.
Okay, thank you. I recognize Mr. Lesser had a question before, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. First question was, and lots of information, so that we went over pretty quickly. Chapter 13.40, where we talk about the inspection every 2 years. First question I have is, what's an estimate of the cost of that inspection?
If the property owner does it himself, there will be no cost to it. In fact, the handbook, the property owner's maintenance guide handbook that Mary referred to in her presentation is actually going to have worksheets that the property owner can use to go through and do the inspection themselves, and to use those very helpful, simple worksheets to do that. Of course, if the property owner wants to hire a PE or a landscape architect or someone skilled in landscape, they would be free to do that, but they also would be eligible to do it themselves.
Okay, so that can't, because that's what confused me. I had heard landscape, et cetera, but so basically it's kind of a checklist, walk through, answer the questions, document everything, et cetera, and you can do it yourself without any added expense then.
Absolutely, and that was the target audience.
The next question is similar to that. What would the estimated cost be of professional certification that's required every 6 years? What would the estimated cost on something like that be done?
I do not have a cost, but I can get that and email that to the city manager to provide to the council members.
I guess we do have Councilman Dobler. I don't know if Councilman Dobler, is that something that you would have any idea?
Yeah, I really don't at this time. It depends on the extent of the inspection. I think probably the size of the BMP and some other things like that. So I would defer to city staff on that.
Okay, that's fine. I just, for the sake of asking, the other question on the professional certification every 6 years is, how's that going to come into play on like the sale of a property? Will one be required for the sale at any type of sale of a property? Is an inspection going to have to be done prior to the sale?
Well, certainly it's not going to be required by the city, but I would imagine that a buyer and seller could negotiate the terms themselves if the purchaser wanted to have a BMP inspected. As Mary had referred to, one of the critical reasons for having the record drawings out there is to help a purchaser of the property so that there is a very clear record as to what BMPs are on the property, what the planting plan is for them, so that that property owner knows what they're getting. And then the other point I'll make is these ordinance changes are prospective in nature. This is not going to go back in time, and any BMP anywhere in the city is not going to be required to do this. It's going to be new BMPs implemented after this ordinance is passed are going to fall under these requirements.
I get that, and that's why, there again, this is the first time we've been presented with this. This was a long, not deep explanation over this period, so forgive me for not understanding the full depth of this thing. So let me ask the question again then. There isn't anything in here that is going to be a requirement at the sale, no different than there's certain requirements that take place in real estate when a property gets bought or sold that is going to require that a new certification be done. That's not contemplated right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess the other two more quick questions. One is, I would kind of look at more of a 10-year versus a 6-year as well. I mean, it seems kind of arbitrary, but whatever. And then the other question that I have is and this may be for legal as well, is if we go into this process here and we do that where we have certification and the city said, okay, you've certified this, you've done this. What I'm getting at is the problem that we had over there in my district off of Wanamaker by the Dick's Sporting Goods and the Douthit building right down there at the bottom where that had not been maintained properly, stuff. Are we going to have any culpability in the event that an event like that happens and someone such as the Douthit building gets the same type of loss in the future?
So I will, of course, defer to the legal department, but the short answer is no. Under the Tort Claims Act, our failure to perform an inspection does not give rise to liability to the city. So certainly it's intended to provide us with a large set of tools to help us to make sure that there's compliance, but will not give rise to liability in the event that we fail to follow up and adequately inspect.
And that sounds good, but I also know that we made a payment on that loss as well too. So that sounds good that the Tort Claims Act is out there. I'm aware of that, but there again, I guess I'll ask Lisa then that question is: does this put any additional liability on our plate by mandating this if we don't do our job?
Councilmember Lesser, it really depends a lot on the facts and circumstances. You start with the premise that Braxton mentioned, but then in the situation that you're discussing, there are other facts and circumstances that weighed into it. So it does depend on a lot of those factors, and it's on a case-by-case basis. So it's going to depend from case to case.
What staff is going to be then responsible for making sure that the certification is done? Is that going to be existing staff, or are we going to hire new staff to do that?
The plan is to use existing staff, and very much the plan is to do a few true-up inspections to make sure to keep people honest. It's not to go out and re-inspect every single BMP.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have got several questions. I'll try not to drag this out too long. Braxton, how did the negotiation with KDHE EPA go? Did they back down from anything, or did we accept everything that they put in front of us?
Actually, I would say that our negotiations with them were very successful. We got them to completely back down on the TMDL. They actually wanted us, initially they wanted us to achieve measurable reductions in the 3 TMOs I identified. Ultimately, they allowed for us to have a couple of BMPs that were designed for reduction and allowed us to do that. On a couple of the points, they just dropped them entirely because I think that the inspector failed to understand what we were doing. So overall, I would say that we were very successful, and I will point out that there was no administrative, monetary, no financial penalty imposed upon us.
Great. Thank you for that answer. How was the development community and the consultants that serve the development community involved in this project?
Thank you. Our initial meeting with them, I would say, was December of 2019, and I believe that we had more than 50 of the design consultants, the design community at that meeting where we did our initial review of it. Subsequent to that, I personally met with each one of the design firms that work in Topeka and met with them and discussed concerns, comments, got their feedback. And then in August of 2020, we had another meeting, and this one, because of COVID, was virtual, and I think that we had 37 consultants participating from Topeka, Manhattan, and Kansas City. So we very much have had the open door in terms of engaging them, getting the feedback, buy-in. I will point out that Gary alluded to the fact that many of these changes we've already administratively done. We've had water quantity for many years, and in the last 3 years, we have married quantity and quality together in a single review. So a lot of this is not new. We've adopted the MARC manual back in 2017, which Mary had alluded to. So a lot of this is not new.
Thanks, Frank. By the way, I was involved in the original promulgation of the detention requirement, so good to know that I'm old school now. That kind of gets you in the face. A couple other questions. Do we have any idea how this affects?
Mr. Dobler, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Wait, I might have reset it.
You were coming in loud and clear, then midway through that last question, your volume went way down.
Cut you off.
Yeah, I think can you hear me now?
Well, I'm saying we took a vote here and we decided to mute your, sorry. Can you try now, please, Neil?
You hear me now?
Just barely.
You might have covered up your mic, Mr. Dobler.
I don't know, it's right here. It says it's uncovered, so I don't know.
Okay, we'll try to listen. Taylor's going to turn up the volume real quick.
Okay, and I'll try to keep this short. I've only got a couple of other things.
Okay.
What I think the regulations indicated, and I know Braxton said this is only for development going forward from here, but it also mentioned redevelopment. So where does that come into play? What constitutes redevelopment of a site with a current BMP that would require it to meet the new regulation?
So if you have an existing, let's just say it was an existing detention pond, and you had a site that had a half acre of impervious surface, and you were going to add an additional half acre of impervious surface to trigger you over 1 acre of impervious, at that point, that would trigger your having to comply with the quantity and quality requirements.
Okay, so it wouldn't just be adding on to a building or doing something like that that would require you to meet these requirements, right?
As long as you kept under that 1 acre threshold of impervious surface. And the other thing I'll point out is, for the most part, 1 and 2 person, single family homes are exempt from these requirements. So it's not like we're going to be requiring people in a platted subdivision to go out and build detention basins. The developer of that subdivision is going to be, if there's going to be more than 1 acre of impervious surface, is going to have to provide some regional level of BMP to serve that subdivision, but single-family residential exempt. So think of this as commercial developments is what's going to be triggering this review.
Thank you. How does this compare with our neighbors down the road in Lawrence and Kansas City, for that matter? Are they under similar consent decrees? Are they going to have similar requirements for development?
Well, just on the inspection alone, we did survey, and 10 of the communities in Johnson County require an annual inspection by a PE. So I think that our more moderate approach of once every 6 years having it by a PE is being very reasonable and fair. All of the, I should say, the vast majority of the Johnson County communities have all adopted the MARC manual, and basically they have the same rules related to quality that we do, and have the same rules related to quantity, whether it's peak or volume sensitive basins.
How about Lawrence? Do you know?
Lawrence is a phase 2 permit, not a phase 1.
Okay.
But I think it's just a matter of time, Neil. In my experience, it's just a matter of time before the EPA gets us all.
The phase 2, this is Mary, the phase 2 requirements are very, very similar to the phase 1 requirements. So in fact, the phase 1 requirements came out of what EPA was doing for phase 2.
Final question, I guess. Have we looked at any regional BMPs for quality? It might make a difference if there's, if there's development that is having, if there's areas that are having difficulty being developed. Have we looked at regional? Is there an opportunity? Yes.
It's open. Yes, so the answer is yes, we're always looking for opportunities for regional BMPs to help with quality.
Very good.
The ordinance also contains a provision that allows developers to access those BMPs if they're there. So.
There's the potential for a regional BMP that individual properties pay into some sort of fund that helps develop that and maintain it under these ordinances.
No, we chose not to go that route, Neil, because of the legal challenges requiring, under the Nolan and Dolan cases and requiring the nexus. But what we have allowed for is if the developer has a site that is so constrained in size that he's not able to achieve the quantity and quality on that site, he would be able to do a regional BMP downstream to meet the requirements.
That makes sense. That's all the questions I have. I think this has been well thought out. I appreciate the input from the local community on this, and I'll be in support. Thank you very much.
And just for the benefit of everyone else that doesn't know, correct me if I'm wrong, please, anyone, Braxton, Mary, or Neil, a regional BMP would basically be a larger community-based asset, maybe a 3 or 4 acre pond or something like that. Is that correct? Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is Sylvia. So we have multiple BMPs that we would call regional BMPs across the city, and you're right, they're going to be on public property. They're going to be something that the city maintains and that the city uses to credit a lot of these areas that are already built out, where there's not a lot of room to do BMPs for those newer developments that are very sporadic.
Thank you very much. And I believe Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala was next.
Sorry about that, Deputy Mayor. I was just like, I couldn't hear. I was having a really hard time hearing Neil.
Oh.
No questions.
No problem at all. Are there any other questions at this time? I'm sorry, Councilwoman Hiller, sitting right here next to me.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This may be an academic or kind of a silly question, but I'm thinking of residential and I'm looking at the discounts. My constituents are always interested in discounts. Is this ever applicable to a residential property?
No, the answer to that question is no, the discount is not going to be applicable to a residential property, but more importantly, the property owner is not going to be required to construct a BMP and maintain it on their property either, which is what triggers and entitles you to get the discount.
Thank you. I heard that earlier, but I know sometimes people ask if there's a big site especially, or people that still have ditches instead of curb and gutter, wonder since they're doing that natural runoff, I don't mean to open up a Pandora's box there, but just wondered. So because they're not required, they're also not eligible? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Duncan, go ahead.
All right, for us novices who only have very limited knowledge of what we're talking about here, I apologize up front, but what assessments do we do, whether it's with the property owner or as a city, when someone wants to build one of these, as to whether it's even appropriate to build it for that location, spot, feasibility? What role does the city play, or can that owner build it regardless of what our opinion is?
Thank you, Councilmember Duncan. That's a great question. And the city has a very active role in reviewing the stormwater management plan and the drainage report and doing the review of the proposed BMP, both to make sure that it meets the required level of service under the MARC manual, as well as to make sure that it is appropriate BMP for that particular site.
Thank you.
Mr. Copley, the question's been raised here to me. When do you absolutely, unless you get another extension, when do you absolutely have to have this adopted? Is it by our last meeting in October?
Without getting an extension, technically it's September, but we're in the process of requesting from the EPA with our last submittal to them to ask an extension for October. The other thing that I'll point out is that we have this ordinance set with an effective date of January 1st, 2021, knowing that if the governing body goes ahead and approves this, as we're going to ask them to do in October, that will give us a couple of months to continue to work with our consultants to put materials out there for the development community, both developers as well as design community. It's basically education materials to be out there, again, because of the auspices of COVID, to make sure that we've got those to help kind of spread the word as well. So that's a built-in buffer that we have to provide us another opportunity to continue to educate the development community, both the designers and developers.
Okay, Councilmember Duncan, go ahead.
One more question. Does this apply to just within the city limits, or does it have any application in the 3-mile zone?
Another great question. The answer is that police power stops at the city limits. This is not part of the subdivision regulations. This is just a regular municipal code ordinance. So this goes totally within the city limits.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Copley, going back to that previous question then, right now, you technically would need to, we would have to adopt it tonight to meet your original deadline, but you're asking for an extension into October. So as long as we, do we meet? For some reason, I don't show a meeting on the third Tuesday in October. Okay. The first meeting in October, I think, is the 6th. The second is the 13th, and the third is the 20th. Could we adopt on any of those days?
Assuming the EPA gives us the extension that we requested for adoption of the ordinance in October, yes, I would leave it up to you to adopt in any of those 3 meetings.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess my suggestion would be we're going to have close to 3 weeks here, I think, between now, or at least 2.5 weeks, I think, between now and our next meeting. Is there I guess I'm kind of asking the council here, is there some consensus, or is there, again, Sylvia, go ahead. Sorry, Ms. Ortiz, go ahead.
Thank you. Braxton, I was asking that because you're saying this is due, that the deadline is September 2020. We don't meet again. So how will we handle that if we don't get an extension, and how soon will we find out if we get an extension?
We'll follow up with the EPA tomorrow. We provided them with the request some time ago, and then we also provided them with the draft ordinance, but we can reach out to them to follow up on our request for the extension until October.
Okay, and then again, Mike, would that be the end of September or the end of October? My concern is, I have some questions, and I'm gonna have to sit down with somebody to get my questions answered. To make sure that I fully understand what we're doing here. So that's why I kind of wanted to know, when are we gonna put this on the agenda to make sure that I get all my questions answered, or that I understand what we're doing?
My understanding is on the preliminary agenda for the October 6th meeting, and certainly I will make myself available anytime that you like to sit down and discuss the ordinance and answer any questions that you have.
Okay. So when will we know if they don't honor that extension?
I don't have the answer to that. We will follow up with the EPA tomorrow to follow up on our request for extension until October.
Okay. So I guess there might be a possibility we might have to call a special meeting then.
I would say that that's a very remote possibility, and keep in mind, the EPA does not move with great rapidity. I mean, they sat on the audit investigation for a year before they came back to us with the notice of violation.
I totally understand that, Braxton, but at the same time, it'd be our luck. They're gonna say, it'd just be our luck. So that's just trying to cover all bases. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
You're welcome, and I'd recognize Councilwoman Hill.
Based on the last water-related issue we had, let me ask a question, just so we know. Braxton, you've discussed that you've had 2 big hearings and met individually with a substantial number of the contractors that would be invested in this. Are there any lingering concerns that you're aware of on the part of any of them about these proposals?
To clarify, I met with the design community, so I met with all of the engineers and the few architects that were interested to have the discussions with them, not with the contractors. And the design community, no, I'm not hearing any lingering concerns or any red flags, again, because so much of this has already been implemented in terms of how we do review of quantity and quality. I mean, it's a handful of items that truly are new changes that are being proposed as part of this ordinance.
Thank you so much. And from any other part of the construction community, I don't know how these usually go. Just trying to see if there's anything lingering out there that would be brought to our attention later. Nothing.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Braxton, have we sent the design handbook to them at all? To the governing body? I can't remember.
The design handbook and the property owner's maintenance handbook are both on the city's stormwater page, and we have provided an email to all the design community identifying where those are. And at the August meeting, that was the big point of it, which was to make all those materials available to them. But anyone in the city is available to go to our stormwater webpage, and we have the design handbook as well as the property owner's maintenance handbook are both on the webpage and have been for a couple of weeks.
Okay. So we can make sure that we send the link to the governing body. I think there's a lot of information in the design handbook from when I looked at it that would also help answer questions that have been brought up tonight. And so that would be something additional to check. Remember, in the back of the packet tonight, we had frequently asked questions that you can also refer to governing body as far as additional items that maybe you aren't even thinking of right now. Look at those FAQs. And then as Braxton said, I know Braxton will make himself available to assist with going through this information. I think that at this point, my recommendation is that we keep this on the October 6th agenda. We'll continue to seek the answer from the EPA regarding the extension, and if possible, we get that extension, we can move this to a discussion item versus an action item. And for that matter, at any point, we can defer. If there are still questions, we want to make sure we're answering those questions. And even if we have a deadline with the EPA, we need to make sure that we're approving what we want to approve here rather than moving in a hurry to approve it. And so we'll deal with it. But I think at this point, we would keep it on there, and then if we don't get our questions, then we'll seek a deferral of the item to another date and address it then.
Yes, Councilmember Dover.
Yeah, can you hear me all right now, Deputy Mayor?
Not really.
Okay, never mind.
Highlighted this thing for some reason, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, 1 second. Taylor can kind of turn you up here just a second.
I don't know.
Okay, how about now?
It's better.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just looked this up, and in violation of an EPA consent decree requires apparently the Deputy Director of Utilities to go directly to federal prison. So I'm not sure we're all that concerned with what happens, right?
Well, in that case, I move we defer this to January. No. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions at this time? We are past our normal break time, and since there's 4 people signed up to speak, 3 people signed up, and then we have our announcements, I cannot wait another 20 or 25 minutes. So at this time, let's take a 5-minute break and be right back in here, okay? Thanks.
All right.
On now?
Yes.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. It's now the point of our meeting that we have public comment, and we have 3 individuals signed up to speak. And the first will be Mr. Brian Roach. Mr. Roach, you have 4 minutes, and a little timer right there. It'll beep, and you have 1 minute left.
Awesome. Good evening, council members. I'm not here to tell you what the rules being broken are by this. Oh, I don't know. Do you even know what I'm talking about? I'm sorry. I do. I'm new to this. This is in regards to an amendment or addendum that was made to the plumbing code about excavation and licensed contractors. Sorry, about a month ago. I'm not here to tell you what the rules are being broken by this book. I am simply here to remind you what this book represents. Plenty of other professionals have given you code numbers and definitions with explanation. The city has adopted this book of minimum requirements for 59 years. As a council, you have made what seems like a harmless addendum to this code, yet there are many actual violations of this book's code. This code is enforced mostly for public safety. I have also read in an email sent from Tony Emerson in response to the same concern that his company will not benefit from this. Please forgive my own assumptions on this as I am confused. How does any company from a trade allow the complete dismissal of another trade not benefit? He is cutting out what he calls the middleman to gain profit and more work for himself. If this middleman wasn't necessary, why would you and most of the United States adopt this code that says otherwise? I would also like to explain a couple of definitions. 1, excavator, a workman who excavates for foundations of buildings or for quarrying. Working man or workman, an employee who performs manual or industrial labor. Definition 2, excavators, a machine for excavation. 3, plumber. Plumbers perform work involving the installation, repair, maintenance, and renovation of all piping, fixtures, appurtenances, and appliances for a supply of water or for the disposal of wastewater, liquid waste, or sewage within or adjacent to any building, structure, or conveyance on the premises and to the source of supply of water or point of disposal of wastes. Plumbers are subject to licensing and regulation under state and local laws. B, state and building codes apply to plumbing and plumbing systems to ensure that they are designed, constructed, installed, improved, extended, and altered in accord with applicable code. Excavation or licensed contractor is not in any part under any definition for plumber that I have found. Just as a surgeon, lawyer, general contract, or even a beautician must get a specific license and certain amount of training to legally perform their trade, so does a plumber. We train, study, and constantly learn new applications and old of this trade for many years. By definitions of rules in this book, you adopted this rule that any excavation or licensed contractor performing this work is a violation or total disregard of this book. As a plumber of 23 years, a small business owner, and father, I must oppose this addendum that 1, neglects public safety, 2, neglects the minimum requirements, and 3, what appears to me to be illegal by this book that you adopted, that I follow per your rules. I really do thank you very much for all your time. And I don't know if it really matters. I'm a little confused, but your storm that you were talking about earlier, storm and wastewater, is covered partially in this book. The transference and conveyance of that water. That's something plumbers do and know. This book is important. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments, Mr. Roach. The next person signed up is Ms. Kasha Zott.
Good evening, Council. I want to thank you again for listening to me. 3 weeks in a row, you're doing well. When I first got here to Topeka, I seen the emerald green grass and trees. The architecture is beautiful, and the beautiful neighborhoods. I thought, I can live with this. I came in from Colorado on a job that fell through. Anyways, and through a series of events and circumstances, I wanted to leave, and yesterday was not good enough. I wanted to be gone. But while I'd been extended, that word's been going through pretty much. I started laughing listening to the thing. I met some of the police department, I met some of the fire department, and I met you, the city council. You are people that truly care about this city and its people. Even your transit systems overflow with people that care. I have met people in organizations that have been a safety net for the homeless, and they're caring people as well. They are making my transition from homeless to a home easier. I'm planning to stay in Topeka. I have a part-time employment now, and I did my first stretch session in a local gym. And as usual, I spent time in the library. Again, beautiful people, beautiful places. I've walked the city in the rich history, the first Native American vice president, the first president of the NAACP, Brown versus Board of Education, and the Free State, the Underground Railroad to abolish slavery. I believe that when our founding fathers drafted the Constitution, this is what they had envisioned. There was a slogan in the Topeka History Room. I went there last Sunday, and it said, "As goes Kansas, so goes the nation." I can only hope and pray and believe it, and will even bet my life on it. Topeka is a seat of power, but it's a town with a home feeling. When I get an address, I'm going to get my Kansas ID. I'm going to run to the library and get a library card. I want to be part of the Citizens Academy and the Citizen Council boards. I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of Topeka history, because this city is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And the last person signed up is Mr. Ron Gish.
I appreciate you guys' time, everybody, and I also agree with her. This is a beautiful city. I love this city. I've been here since 1989. I came here from Abilene, Kansas, 8,000 population approximately, as a police officer there. Came to Topeka for the police department, went through KLETC, and then came to Topeka and went through their police academy. And anyone that knows me, and it's only a few, as I see up here on the screen and here, but I spent a lot of my time in public relations. I was in the DARE program in the schools about 5.5 years, and I went into, as a sergeant, I was detective, but I also was a sergeant, and I spent a lot of my time as a public information officer for the City of Topeka Police Department, and talking to the media and sharing information. I was a crime prevention specialist, did the crime prevention, went around to homes and things of that nature. So this city is beautiful, and I have a lot invested in it. I raised my family here, my kids. I'm married, have a wife, and I appreciate this city, and that's why we stay. It's a good place to live. I think I agree with everything she just said. But I'm here tonight really to talk about the strengthening police and community partnerships, because it does have something to do with public relations and the police department, which I endear. You know, I really do want that department to look professional and have that image. And what I saw in the last month, maybe or so, because strengthening police and community partnerships is pretty new, but it's something that it really hasn't got a good base or foundation for how they accept people. I was a recruiting sergeant, and we worked very hard to screen those applicants and make sure we're getting the best and the most qualified and people that are going to stick around and actually make it a career. But what's happening with that strengthening police and community partnerships, I don't feel like there's really a good process. Those people are able to self-select. They just pick who's coming in. There's really no background, and they're giving advisory information to the police department. I don't know how much they're listening to it. I hope they are. I think it's a good program. I think it's a great program, so don't get me wrong there. But what we saw when we had this special session, we had some of those members in the crowd with Black Lives Matter protesting. And that wasn't the first time I had seen them. The first time I saw them was posts where they had anti-police and pro-Black Lives Matter information on their social media. What I would ask is simple. If they're going to be on any kind of a board with the City of Topeka and they're going to represent in any way the City of Topeka, that they should be screened somehow. There should be some screening process, and that they should be given the orientation that every other city employee is given, where they're talked about social media policies and how that's handled. And then when they go through that process, they should be held accountable. There should be some way to hold them accountable and get them off of that board if there's someone that's not representing the city in a good light or in a professional light. And that's just what we ask of all of our employees with the City of Topeka. We always have, since I've been here since 1989. And I think it should be expected of any board or any committee or anything else, that there should be some way to hold them accountable. And I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to be disrespectful. It wouldn't be really right to do that. But I did send an email asking with that information. But I know you guys are really busy. I hope you had time to look at it. It was a long one, and I thought a lot about it. So I do ask that you go through and look at it and consider the things that were in it. And that's really all I have. And I appreciate you guys' time. I know it's been a long night. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. All right. Time for announcements. No meeting, so Mr. Trout.
The only thing I will say is just a little bit about the next meeting. We will have a discussion item on special alcohol grants recommendations. We'll start talking about that. We will have the action item on the stormwater code revisions, and obviously we'll be prepared to defer if needed at that point. Those are the only two items for sure. There are a couple of other items that, if we have them ready, we'll add to the agenda. And obviously, there's 3 weeks before our next meeting.
All right, thank you, Mr. City Manager. And Councilwoman Hiller.
Can I just say something really quickly? I'm sorry, point of order.
Sure.
Deputy Mayor, the last probably 20 to 30 seconds of Mr. Gish's comments, we did not hear that on Zoom, and so if we seemed like we were paying attention, we were really trying to get back to you guys. So.
Yeah, that was a network issue over here. It cut out, and I had to restart it, so I apologize for that.
Thank you. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. Want to reflect back to our retirees and the comments about the financials and so on as well, and just do a shout out in general to the staff. It's really been quite a time. It's been more than 6 months, I guess, since we've been in COVID. We worried about a lot, been through a lot, and really do appreciate everyone's efforts. We've still got our hands full. We don't know what the winter will bring exactly, and we've got some big issues on our hands. But I've said before how proud I am to be on this particular council and to work for the city and as an elected official, and I remain that way. It's not always easy, but it's good. I brought with me just a little piece of good news tonight for the comments, and that is, if people don't know it, a local businessman, Ken Schmanke, has purchased the Bank of America Tower in downtown. We've done a lot of work that's had out-of-state ownership for a while. It's very exciting, and it was kind of came to mind for today because tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning there'll be a ribbon cutting for the reopening of the Townsite Cafe, which many are kind of a renovation and a reopening of that cafe, and that's meant a lot to a lot of people, particularly those that have worked in the tower or that Townsite Plaza for a long time. But I stopped in to visit with the gentlemen that run the cafe today, and already there's some remodeling and redecorating happening in that tower. It's just refreshing and exciting as we're doing what we're doing with downtown to see the tower coming along as part of that and that whole Townsite complex. So hats off to Townsite Cafe and Ken for moving that piece of our city along. That's it. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Big shout out, a couple of things. Big shout out to Doughboys Pizzeria that opened up officially on the 1300 block. I think it's 1312 North Kansas Avenue. Hope to go in there this weekend. I've heard it's very, very good, and good luck to them in their future business endeavors. I just thought that it was really remarkable that we're coming upon, or actually into celebrating the Underground Railroad Month. I do want to say that as we reflect on that, the call for civil rights, we all know continues to this day, as well as the struggle for human rights. I read a very sad social media commentary today from an individual that will go unnamed. But this individual called out, and to me totally disrespected, organizations like the NAACP, Mainstream Incorporated, Topeka Center for Peace and Justice. This individuals, and it sounds like a number of others, deemed these organizations as having radical agendas. And I would say that as we look back in history, if we look back at the Underground Railroad, I'm sure that there were many that thought that that was too radical. I'm sure that when we look at Brown v. Board, there were many that thought that that was too radical back then. And what they knew back then and what we know now is that was never true. And so when we look at history and when we look at the stories and hear the stories of the human struggle, always, always, the light will shine the brightest on the truth and help diminish and destroy the false narratives that were or are still being created. So I would just like to say that I hope that we can all remember and celebrate with dignity and honor the history of the Underground Railroad, because it means a lot to a lot of people in this state and in this city. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The truth will set you free. I just want to say to everyone, I hope you have some good time off. It looks like we're all very busy. And October is my favorite month. And if you don't know why, it's only because we celebrate my brothers, the firefighters, and I will have a special prize for everyone on the first meeting. So just, you know, everybody loves presents. I appreciate all they do. And I meant to bring a picture of the back of all the firefighters' trucks that say, the apparatuses that say back 343, stay back. And a lot of people think that they need to stay that distance back. And let me give you a little bit of history. Those are the 343 firefighters that were lost in 9/11. And that's what my brothers do, the brotherhood. They remember each and every day, and each and every day that they pull out, they remind themselves and remember those that have fallen. So I can't wait till October. It's just around the corner, and I can't wait to give you your prizes. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ortiz. I will pass for tonight, and next we go to Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a list, but I'm not going to make it long. I'd like to follow up on what Councilwoman Padilla talked about with regards to heritage and Underground Railroad. September is Hispanic Heritage Month, and so I want everybody to remind themselves about that, because Topeka is rich in Hispanic heritage. There were a lot of population that came here and has made it what it is today. And so I just want to bring that around. Along with that, I think of those railroad tracks and reading the paper article that we had just recently about the development and the purchase of all those buildings right along those railroad tracks and down by the railroad station, where there's plans for all kinds of things that are still yet to be developed here for Topeka. It makes it very encouraging to see that that's happening close to that same area, and it gives me hope for the continued growth of this city. And our financial report today, I think, was encouraging as well. I want to remind everybody about the census. I'm still on the job to the end of the month. I need for all of you to take a look at those PSAs that we've been pushing out and put them on your Facebook, Instagram, wherever you can, and encourage everybody to continue to participate and encourage others to participate. We have a short timeline, but we can reach our goal, I believe. So please give that some thought. There's something that came up this week that I didn't bring up during the regular meeting, and I ask that you all think about it. I sent you some information with regarding to Safe Streets, an organization that has been in this community since at least 1995. I want and ask you to look at it, make yourself familiar with this organization and the related organizations that are being affected by some of our budget cuts, and see if we can find a way to keep this citizen-based community action program here in Topeka still active, because this is the way the citizens who say, what can I do to help? They can't be a police officer, they can't be a firefighter, they can't be a councilman maybe, but this is the thing that they can get involved with on a volunteer basis in their neighborhoods, and it can make a real difference. So I ask you to consider that information. And last, but certainly not least, I probably should have put it at the top of the list. With regards to the activities we've seen in this last week, it saddens me to see people to take the time to video two officers fighting for their lives, and they don't step in to help. Maybe they did, but it doesn't show that on the video. It just shows somebody videotaping them as they fight for their lives. This is not something that we can accept as a community, as Americans. We have to stop this violence. So I ask you to give a moment of thought to the officers who are suffering under these conditions right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to echo Councilman Padilla's thoughts and Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala's thoughts. In this time where it seems like there can be two sides between law enforcement and people of color and the people who support both of those groups, know that we're all in this together and that we should all support each other in the best way that we can to make a safer, better community. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Two things. First of all, along with Councilman Padilla, I support the continuation of safe streets if at all possible. I think we heard some promising news tonight from Deputy Mayor that perhaps funding may be available out there. I know there's no promises at this point, but I think probably everybody on this council would support that. I also wanted to take just a minute. I think everyone on the council knows that I had a couple of different stints with the city of Topeka in my career, both of those in public works. And as I looked at the folks that are retiring tonight, there's just a ton of them on there that I worked with. Not going to name everybody, but Jay Euler and Barbie Pyle, Dave Fish, Kent Pelton, really the list goes on and on. A great group of people, and you look at the number of years that they served the city of Topeka, it's incredible. Good years, and the unfortunate thing is it also means we've got a lot of years of experience walking out the door. And somehow we've got to replace those folks at some point with those same levels of experience. They all did a great job, and I commend them and wish them well in retirement. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan.
Just a few things. I will do exactly what I've been instructed by Councilman Padilla and continue to promote the census through the rest of this month. I have continued to try to do my part on social media, wore my shirt, put my picture out there, made sure the world see. I think I've said this before, but 10 years ago I was a census taker. It was a fascinating experience. In 10 years now that you can do it online. So I keep telling people, it's 10 questions. I mean, it is so simple. Just please go do it, and I will continue to hammer folks until the end of the month on that. You can't beat the internet, and I can only imagine what my life would be like if I tried and spent my days trying to chase down every little bit of misinformation that gets put out there. Obviously, that would be a fool's errand. And the reason I say that tonight is I had an interesting call from a constituent today who said, you know, your name's come up on a few posts, and I swear it doesn't sound right because you gave me emails that said something slightly different. And we had a great conversation, and they mentioned, well, you could try to correct it. And again, I told her the same thing. That is a fool's errand. You will not beat the internet. But the reason I bring that up tonight is just a reminder to everybody out there, you know, myself and many other councilmen are very accessible. I mean, I am on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I have an email, and I have a phone number, which is how I got the call today. And if you just see something that doesn't sound right to you or goes against what an email that I sent you and you just have questions, just ask. You know, just ask. And so, and that's how we will correct things. It is amazing in this world that misinformation will spread so much faster than the factual information, right? But so be it. So instead of fighting it all the time, you just kind of have to do what you can to plug away. Two more quick things. I appreciate the city manager tonight bringing in the retirees. I will take some credit. That was something but that's not why I bring it up. Being someone obviously who's a Topeka native and now sitting here, those folks serve our city very well and did for many years. And all of our employees right now are serving the citizens of this city extremely well. And I just think it's nice. We always get emails about, hey, so-and-so's retiring, can you do this, can you do that? But it's nice to put a name to the face and at least take a few minutes to thank them for all the years they put service into this community. And so I'm glad that's something we're going to be doing because I think it's, you know, it's literally the least we can do. I wish I could hand them all a check on the way out the door or something, right? But I mean, I think it's important, and I think it helps us recognize the time that folks have put into the city. So I'm glad we're going to start doing that. My last thing is, you have until October 13th to register to vote. And I think what the last 6 months, with whatever the issue is, whether it's policing or COVID or other, if you haven't been reminded that those of us who sit in these chairs can impact your life, then you've not been paying attention. So if you really want change and you want things done the way your worldview is, or you make sure your ideas get put in front of these governing bodies, register to vote and actually show up at the polls in November. But the deadline is October 13th, so get it done. You got a month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And last but certainly not least, Councilman Lesser.
Couple things, thank you. I too push the census, as I promised Councilman Padilla. You won't see me wearing my shirt. You will see my son doing it, because I don't know what the hell Padilla was thinking giving me a small shirt. I haven't worn a small shirt since 1986. So you will see my son. You're probably wearing that, but thanks for the thought there, Padilla. Secondly, in seriousness, I struggle kind of say this, but I guess I'll say it because it's kind of important to me. I think it's a great deal recognizing these long-term employees. It says a lot about the organization, says a lot about the people, as Neil said, and others have said as well. I want to point out, one of the individuals retiring was Mr. Officer Fye, and when my daughter died, he was one of the first people that called me in his capacity. So the only thing I say that is, in regards to that, a little constructive criticism is, let's make sure when we do it next time that we make some phone calls and make sure we pronounce everybody's name right, to be honest with you. I think that's important. And I say that constructively. I think it's a great thing that we're doing. But let's show them we care enough that we do that as well, because I think that's important. And I don't say that, like I said, criticize, just constructive criticism. I think it's important to show that. So thank you to all those individuals. I'm going to miss working with, I won't name them all, but a variety of those people that are going out the door. So Tony's getting ready to hit that hammer, so it looks like I better stop talking. So thank you very much.
I just wish I had a gong, and we are hereby adjourned.